Welcome to my studio. My name is Roger Anderson, and this is the Heart of a Trail, a transplant story. And as the name says, I have had a heart transplant. It was 7.5 years ago in 2018. But I want to bring you along on my trail. I use trail instead of story because I think life is a trail. And I'm glad you can join me. I'm out here, beautiful Southern Oregon, and a little town called Grants Pass. Well, not so little, but not a huge city. And I'm up in the hills just outside of it, Savage Creek Trail, bunch of logging trails out here, and I want you to come and explore with me. Today, I'm just out here in a nice spot. Just kind of wanted to show you what God has created for us. I want to ask you a couple questions. The first question is do you find yourself kind of on that same loop, that trail that maybe it's more just like a track, just goes round and around? It's get up, get ready, go to work, come home, have dinner, maybe do a few things around the house, head to bed, and just you're back in that circle. Same thing with the weekend. Maybe it is you doing the same thing every weekend. Maybe just a date on the calendar, but you're doing the exact same thing. And unfortunately, that might be just sitting at home doing nothing. That's what I want to teach you, to maybe not so much as sitting around doing nothing, because that's what I did for a long time. You see, I love being outdoors. I love finding a road, logging trail, hiking trail, and see where it ends. Unfortunately, when I got sick, and I'll get into that here in a couple of moments, but when I got sick, I stopped exploring. And I realized that that was a big part of my life I just left out. You see, that's my beautiful Jeep back there. My wife and I's 2011 Jeep Rubicon. And we've got it so we can get out and explore and not just sit at home anymore. The heart transplant came about in kind of a really long story. We won't get into it all here today. Hopefully you'll come back and we'll fill in parts of it as we explore maybe all of Southern Oregon here. Maybe we'll head to Utah or Nevada, or who knows where we'll end up. But we hope you'll come in and visit us. Now, a little bit about my story so you get to know me. I grew up in California, and I'm 63 years old now. And the early years of my life was filled with sports. I played football, basketball, baseball, even did some bowling and golf. My mom was a big bowler, so we would go along with her. My stepdad was a big golfer, so he taught us how to golf. And then I played football. That was what I lived for, is playing football. In fact, in high school, I won the team MVP one year playing football as a lineman and a linebacker, which is kind of ironic. That doesn't happen very often, but it's just because I loved it so much. Then later on, got a scholarship to go play college ball, went and played 1 year, then things just didn't work out. But I'll tell you what, I just loved life. Eventually ended up joining the Marine Corps and spent 3 years in the Marine Corps. Unfortunately, I injured my ankle. And now, all this time later, after 10 surgeries, I still have a little bit of problem with my ankle. But that's a minor thing. It used to keep me from getting out and hiking and doing some of the stuff that I love to do. And, well, I'll deal with it now because I have to be out here. It was 1996, and the doctors were trying to figure out what was wrong with me. I had a little bit of a skipped beats in the heart, or they weren't sure what was going on. Well, after a whole bunch of tests, I was 33 years old. I was lying on a hospital bed after a whole bunch of tests, including a cardiocath, where they went in with a camera into my heart and checked everything out. Well, they came in after that procedure as I'm laying on the hospital bed, and I could tell immediately by the doctor's face that he had some bad news for me. I was 33 years old. My wife and I had been married a few years, but not a long time. Side note, I love you, honey. Happy anniversary. Today is our 36th anniversary, and so I just wanted to throw that in there. But the doctor came in and said I had heart failure. Most likely it was a virus. They couldn't tell for sure because the virus was gone by the time the heart failure showed up. But they ruled everything else out, and so they pretty much were positive it was a virus. What does that mean? There's so many things that go through your mind. The doctors were giving us all kinds of information, my wife and I. Some of it was not very, very good. The life expectancy for somebody with my diagnosis was 50% of people diagnosed passed away in the first 5 years. Then every 5 years after that, 50% of the remaining passed. So at 33, that means I probably would have died from it if it hadn't been caught early. Luckily for me, it was caught early. The Lord really blessed there. I was going in for surgery on my ankle, and just before it, they wanted to do something, and I was in on the doctors, and the doctor and he later said he doesn't know why he reached down to feel my pulse on my foot where they were going to do the surgery, just to make sure it was nice and strong, and it felt like my heart missed a beat. Well, that kind of panicked them a little bit, and here I am, guy who's very active, doing all kinds of things, came out of the Marine Corps, and that's something that shouldn't have happened. And it's something they should have caught while I was in the Marine Corps. So it had to be something new. My wife and I were both scared, but we knew the Lord was in charge. Took us a while to get there, but eventually we determined that he was in charge and we were going to trust in him. All these years later, we are still trusting in the Lord because he has done some miracles in my life. And we'll get into some of those. Maybe here I'll give you just a small one. On my heart journey, on my trail, I got to the point where my heart was doing really bad. I had these things called PVCs, which is when the ventricle beats and the atrial doesn't. So normally it goes, bump, 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 heartbeat. Mine would just go bump, and it was just the ventricle. I got to the point where every other heartbeat was one of those. So instead of having 60 to 75 heartbeats a minute, I only was having 30 to 35 heartbeats a minute. Made me very tired. And one day my wife was on the computer and she was just checking some things out, and she doesn't know how. She doesn't even know how she got there, but she found a page which was a hospital back east that was just starting a test and a trial on people with heart failure who had arrhythmias. Well, that was me. And don't know why it was back east. We're here on the West Coast. And believe it or not, my doctor at the time was one of the senior cardiologists on the FDA board. I was being treated at San Francisco Veterans Hospital, and He was also the head cardiologist for UC San Francisco. Well, we were talking to him about seeing this, about putting pacemakers in people with these conditions. They aren't approved, but hey, there's a possibility that this might work for me. We asked him. He said, well, I don't know, that's back east, and those trials are pretty time intensive. You have to spend a lot of time doing tests, doing different things for these studies. But he said he'd look into it. Well, a few months later, and as I was getting worse, he came back and said, you know what? I did a couple checks and talked to a few people, and they all agree that, hey, maybe we should try a pacemaker in him. Basically a trial of one. Well, how many of you have heard how fast VA does stuff? Yeah, I've never heard of them doing stuff fast. How many people have heard of the federal government doing stuff fast? Yeah, that usually doesn't happen. But God can make things happen. I went in, they put a temporary one where they put the wire through my neck, into my heart, to a little box sitting next to the bed. And they turned it on and found out most of my PVCs went away. It really helped. They left it in overnight, turned around and came back the next day saying, yep, looks good, it's working. Well, we're not sure how long it's going to take, but we're going to see if we can get permission to put one inside you. Great, that sounds good. Thinking, okay, it might take a little bit of time. Then the doctor said something pretty amazing. He said, your parents live fairly close by, don't they? And at the time I lived about 7 hours away. And I said, yeah, they just live down in Santa Cruz area, and it's only about an hour from here. He said, why don't you go? Now, this is a Friday. He said, why don't you go down and maybe stay with your parents instead of going all the way home? And we're going to see what we can do. The VA got with the federal government on the Friday, Saturday, they had it figured out Friday, Saturday, and got permission to put a pacemaker in me. That alone is just spectacular that could happen on a weekend. They also got together with the company that manufactures the pacemaker to figure out what pacemaker to put in me and what kind of parameters to put on that pacemaker. Again, over the weekend. I got a call late Sunday morning saying, get in here, we're putting a pacemaker in you tomorrow morning. I was floored. My wife is still up in Eureka, where we were living at the time. That's 7 hours away. The only reliable vehicle we had was the one I was driving. And a friend said, hey, I'll take you down. So they jumped in his vehicle and he drove her down to San Francisco. He was a retired pastor. And they got down there just after I had my pacemaker put in. The neat thing is that all of that happened over the weekend. Monday morning, they were scheduled to tear out the operating room and put a brand new operating room in there at the San Francisco VA. They held that up and put that pacemaker in me Monday morning. I got wheeled out while the construction people that were going to tear everything out were waiting in the hallway. All of that could only be done by God. So that's just one of the little trips off of my trail, my story. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you'll come back. I plan on be posting regularly. Maybe some of these will be as we're driving down the trail or sitting around the campfire. I hope you'll come and join me. But I'd like to leave you with a question. And this is a question that hits home with me. I want to know where your heart is telling you you need to go, which trails you need to follow. Thank you.